this cold night. I'd like to call to order the Board of Education special meeting to discuss the budget for Tuesday, January 19th. Present, we expect everybody here, but present at the moment is Jessica Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Anthony Calabrese, Tricia Pitko, and Jennifer Maxon Kennelly. We have a quorum. If you could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have developed a kind of a routine for going through the budget. The agenda is what we'll follow. Some questions have been sent in advance from various board members, and Dr. Title will take some time at the beginning of the meeting at less than 30 minutes, or I'll give him the hook, to go over those common questions and answers, since a number of people asked them. And then we'll go through the pages that we're going to be reviewing tonight. I'll ask each board member to limit their questions and answers to 10 minutes, and so we can get all 9 of us in at 90 minutes. At 9:30, if it all works perfectly, we'll go to the public for comments, and then we'll come back to the board and see if the board has further conversation they wish to have, or wish to defer that conversation to next Tuesday's budget review meeting. The questions that have been sent in advance, together with those that might be asked tonight, will be consolidated on a single Q&A document that, if all goes well, will be part of the Friday packet, so that you'll have it well in advance of next Tuesday's meeting. And I think that's it, unless there are any questions as to process. If not, Dr. Title, what comments do you wish to make?
Well, there were some commonalities in the questions that the board members sent in, and there were topics I think we needed to get to anyways, so I thought we would just start with some of those and do them in public. Excuse me, I'm nursing a cold and a sore throat, so if I sound raspy, and continually drink water, that's what it's all about. There were several questions about the health insurance, so I thought we would start with that. And that was such a big part of this budget that we might as well go through it in a little more detail. I can do all these topics in less than half an hour. It's a question of how long you all want to spend on them. The other two that were had multiple questions had to do with excess cost and special ed tuition versus money in contracted services for ESS. So we'll tackle that next. And there were questions about utilities. If utility rates are going down, why is the budget not going down in utilities? So we'll walk through that a little bit. Those were sort of the three big ones. There's one other piece I want to share with you, but that's pretty much it in terms of the topics. Mm-hmm. So on the health insurance, I think it would be helpful, because it wouldn't be a budget if we didn't do this. If we look at page 159, the medical retention fund, that if all goes according to plan, which it will, this may be the last time you see this page in a budget. And Doreen, I need you to come up and help through this, because this shows how we calculated the budget to ensure that we had enough in our reserve to pay the claims out for the existing plan. It also shows the difference between what the budget would have looked like under the current insurance plan and what the budget would look like under the partnership plan, what the differences are. And we came up with those figures that you saw on the PowerPoint. Oh, thank you. So then there were questions about Aon and the Cadillac Tax and maybe the approval process, or how the unions were involved. But I think the important thing is, let's make sure we're clear on the numbers here. So, Doreen, why don't you maybe just walk us through the highlights of this page, because it differs from the page that they've seen in previous budgets.
True. Columns 3 and 4, the superintendent's budget, is what it would have looked like under the current plan. That's the gray columns. Column 3 is this year's claims through November. Now, what we talked about with Aon in December was through October. This is updated through the latest available information we had at the time, which was through November. So we start with the balance, the July 1 balance, the operating budget, the other sources of revenue, this ITT Hartford, the projected claims. This is what Aon projected through based on the November experience, for a balance of the $2,256,000 with an IBNR of $1,980,000 for a net balance of the $276,000. You might remember with the October numbers, that was a negative, about the same number, but in a negative position. So then we move over to 16-17. Again, this is the balance, the projected operating budget based on the updated claims, updated revenue. Same concept down the column, with a balance of 2.256, an updated IBNR of 2.15, and a net balance of $105,000. Then we move over to column 5 and 6. This is the superintendent's budget under the Connecticut Partnership 2.0 plan. Everything for column 5 is the same as column 3, because that doesn't change. We're still under that scenario for this year, ending with the 2.256. Now, when we get into next year, column 6, the cash moves over. The $20 million is the budget that we need under this plan. We broke out the other revenue between employee contributions, retirees, grants, and rebates. You move down to the pink and the red area down, and those are the projected medical and dental claims in pink. We included as an expense the $1,980,000, which is the IBNR, because we do need to have that money available to pay off the runoff claims that will be incurred before June 30th, but will be paid afterwards. The $500,000 is a reserve we put in there because we still have, at this time, through November, we still had 7 months left to go, where there's going to be, there could be volatility in our claims for this year. So that's a little bit of a reserve just in case those claims go south, which we know they can. Leaves us with a cash balance of the $276. So column 7 shows the differences between the two different budgets. Had we budgeted under the self-insured plan, which we're currently under for next year, and what column 6 is under the Connecticut Partnership Plan. So you'll see in blue for next year, the second blue number, we totaled the impact on the Board of Ed. The savings is almost $3.5 million, which is the 3.349 under the BOE operating budget, and the other blue number down further, which is grants, which is also a savings to us. In the orange, those differences are what the employees would reap the benefit of. So almost 975,000 in total savings to employees under the new, under the Connecticut plan. Down below further is in the pink is the difference in the cost, and the 2.48 is the additional reserve for the IBNR and the potential volatility in claims this year. Column 8 in purple is the difference in the budget between the both scenarios, the superintendent's budget and the Connecticut partnership. And
That's it?
that's it.
So the question of, we really have to have a real reserve this year because we're actually going to pay the claims off. So we are estimating, or Aon is estimating, actually we just inflate the number. They give us a number and we trend it out. 2.151, set 576. If we didn't add anything to the next year's budget, we still have a balance, projected balance of 276,463. So between that and the 500,000, we have a cushion right now of $776,463 to account for if there's a deterioration in claims between now and June 30th of 2016. That's what we put in there. And, you know, every month there'll be an update from Aon about our actual claims and what they project them to be. That to them seemed like a fair figure to put in there. So I think we'll stop there and see if there's any questions. That's the most complicated part of the whole thing. The other questions are fairly simple.
Okay. Board members who had questions, Mr. Patton?
Through the chair to Dr. Title. Actually, not some of the questions I had originally on this, but the $500,000 that's added to the 276,463, that's an extra amount that's budgeted or added to this current budget that we're working on now.
It's included.
It's included in there.
Included in the budget that I presented to you.
Okay.
Right, so it's not, we don't have to add that to the budget. That is included in the number that we added in the budget.
So I'm not sure. When
Okay,
you're saying,
so-
when you're saying it's included, I mean, is it an extra dollar amount that normally, you know, had we not gone into this plan, been included? That's I guess where I'm.
Correct.
Did we added an extra $500,000 just in case to cover the 2015-16
Claims.
IBNR, right?
Yes, that's correct.
To cover the next 7 months of unknown claims.
Right. So we may or may not need that amount.
That's correct.
Okay.
That it?
That's it. Yeah.
Other questions related to medical insurance? Mr. Llewellyn?
Thank you. So if we look at the ending balance of 276, which is the bottom of column 6, and that would be our net balance, that would be cash that's returned to the district if the scenario above were laid out.
The cash never goes back to the district. It sits over in the town's internal service fund.
Okay, so let's look at the 500. So the 500,000 that we've got in that column is 500 that it will leave the district to go over to the internal service fund, or will
Correct.
stay here?
It's going to the internal service fund.
Okay, so if our IBNR
Well,
is
let's put it this way. Should we need it?
correct,
Right, should we need it? That will not, so what's going to happen is, the state's going to send us a bill for the number of people we have, and per head, here's how much you owe. And we send them that amount in, and that's the end of it. So we would not have to move that money into medical retention, but that's the intent of it. Because we need to move money into medical retention to pay the bills from the state. But we need money in July to pay the run out, so.
Sorry, to pay which bills? If
The
our
bill that-
IB&R comes in, sorry, if our IB&R comes in at
Right.
$1,980,000 right on plan, which is the number in red in column 6 labeled reserve for potential, nope, sorry, signal runoff, right?
Signal runoff, right.
Okay, so that $1,980,000, we hit it on the head, so we have that $500,000. Will we have transferred that $500 to the reserve?
I don't know if we would need to do that, actually. We could leave it. We could leave it.
Okay, so that would be a
Yeah,
surplus.
we could leave it. Mhm.
And
The
then,
276 is already sitting there.
and I was going to say, so the 276 is already money left at the
Right.
town for the runoff of other claims in the health fund, so to speak.
If I could comment on where I think you're heading, it would be my guess is that we would not automatically on July 1 put that money in the medical retention fund, but that some staff member would be closely monitoring the bills that are coming in, because if bills more than $1,980,000 come in, then we'll have to transfer the money to that fund so that we could pay them. So it'll be something that probably happens in July or August, because doctors don't always, get the bills out exactly on time.
Yeah, we
So-
won't know.
So it'll be monitored for those
Right.
first 2 months, I think.
But in essence, couldn't the bills come in at $2,300,000 almost, and we not have to transfer the 500 because we have a net balance of 276?
Right, if we know that,
So we can run the 276 to zero before we put in the 500?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Right. Just hard to know what that number's really going to be.
Of course.
Obviously, every month that goes by, it's closer and closer to real. So, yeah, and this is a one-time event. When this budget's done a year from now, that 500 won't be in there.
Right, so another way to put it is if the IB&R comes in at north of $2,256,000, then we have to fund the 500, otherwise that's surplus to our.
Or some portion thereof.
Right, or a portion of it.
So.
And also, at this point, the state's given us an estimate about what the rates will be. Those rates won't get finalized till April. So they told us, for budgeting purposes, add 2% to the spring rates. That's how you should budget it. But what if it's 2.5 or 3? Then we could use the 500,000 toward that as well, because it would still be, available. So that's another, there's still a few unknowns here. And one of them is what the actual increase will be. But the state, every quarter, they increase their rates. So they're not saying you have to go like a full 5%. They're saying go 2% over the latest rates. That's their best guidance.
Is that what we've used?
That's what we used.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions on medical retention fund? If not, we'll move on to the second question. Is there any? No, I don't.
Well, there
see
were a
any.
couple questions about Cadillac tax, right?
Why don't you address the Cadillac tax, even though nobody's followed up with it? And,
Okay, Cadillac tax and Aon, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so Aon earns their money through a contingency arrangement with the town. And essentially what happens is, when you're self-insured, you need them quite a bit to do all these calculations. And so the rates that we were paying with Cigna or anybody sort of built in Aon's fee into the rates. They get a percent. I don't know what it is. If and when we move everybody over to the Connecticut Partnership, there'll be no need for Aon. They're not part of this. There's no need to do all this estimating, because basically the state, it's like being fully insured. You've got a rate, that's it. Doesn't matter what your claims are. We still could use them if we needed them for projects, but they'd still be under contract to the town, provided that the town doesn't switch over. But we would not have any real need for Aon, and so they would be sort of out of the picture. Cadillac tax has been deferred by Congress and the President to 2020. Going to this health plan reduces the value of our health insurance plan, so it actually pulls us farther away from the Cadillac tax. So really, that's out in the distance. Given the way that thing was pushed off in a bipartisan manner, it seems pretty clear from the politics that thing is just never coming back. It had the support of both the conservative Republicans who just anything to do with Obamacare, if they could vote it down, they could. And it's a tax, so they vote against those. And of course, the liberal Democrat side, we're getting a lot of pressure from labor and so forth who were going to be forced to pay this thing. So that was an interesting coalition, and it really takes a big burden off of our necks. But even if we're still there, even if it stays in 2020, they'll have to go in and adjust the number because they had a number in mind for 2018. So it's really out of the picture. I think this puts us in a better place, and it probably is never coming back, and we get 4 years to figure it out. I think that's about it. Okay.
Sorry, one additional question. Column 7, current plan versus plan, the $700,000 rebate. I apologize, I missed if you had said what that was. It's the last number in the top section under income, rebate.
Good, Doreen.
Is your question what happens to it?
What is it? What's it do?
The rebates?
Who's it
It's
from?
rebates from under Cigna, under Cigna, under CVS, Caremark. We get rebates from them for on the drug side. That would go away because we wouldn't get the revenue.
Okay. Got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay, next topic?
The other topic had to do with excess cost and the way we're budgeting that, tuition, because you could see there's a big change in the tuition line versus the professional services line.
Page number?
Why don't we start on page, I can find it in a couple places. Well, somebody asked a question about the revenue. So let's go to the revenue section, and that was the one under discussion. So let me find that page.
Mr.
And
Chairman, could I ask a
Andrea, can you
quick follow-up on the
come on
Cadillac
up?
tax?
Sure.
Well, I just,
No. You lost your chance.
Page 24, we'll start there, because that shows the excess cost. So, basically, the question was, why is there a difference there, or what are we doing with that? We really budgeted the same amount of money. We budgeted at 75%. We move it into these accounts the way it's described here. There's a little less going into tuition than the budget number because the expenditures on their tuition are going to be going down. So because of the way we're reducing the outplacements at the high school, and we took the gross number down. So when you take that number down, we take the net number down. Is that about it, Andrea?
Yes, essentially that's correct. You could have a student who last year at this time was in an expensive residential placement, for example. They graduate or age out of service, and a new student who's in district placed with very high needs. That changes a big portion of where that money would go. So because that number of excess cost is based on a number of students we file in December, it's where their costs are going that we have to track. And that's how we decide where the money's going to go in those accounts. So they can fluctuate pretty significantly based on who the children are receiving excess cost reimbursement.
All right. Is that clear how we're doing that?
Any follow-up questions?
And
Not? Next topic?
yeah, the other related to that is that you'll see in here, large shifts in the budget to reflect the move we made this year, and we're continuing into next year. So the SPED out-of-district tuition account is going down, but the professional services is going up. So let's look for that in the executive summary. I can point it out in the... So in the executive summary, I think it's under 6,
Page number?
block 6. I'm going to find it in a second.
Tuition's on 41.
Yeah. It's hard to do now that Donna gave me that lozenge and I'm holding it in my hand, so. Right. Yeah, tuition's on 41. All right.
And pupil personnel services is on 37.
Right. So on 41, you can see the decrease there. in the tuition because we're expecting fewer outplacements next year. So that becomes the negative number. And that's total tuition. That includes special ed as well as regular ed, like tuition we pay to VOAG and so forth. Those are going down a little bit, but about 645 of that number is the special ed number. And then the contracted services where the big increase is pupil personnel service on page 37, and that's number 303, and that's going up, and that's where that number is going up, but that also includes some additional services that are going up. So, Andrea, can you explain the other pupil personnel services that are going up in addition to the mental health initiative at the high schools?
Yes, I think also we have to remember that we are a pre-K-12 school district, so the work we're doing right now in the high school does not include our pre-K-8 population, and we are seeing some significant issues related to mental and behavioral health in those arenas. So there may still be outplacements or other things that we have to do because we don't yet have the services within the schools at the intensity level they may need. So while this project at the high schools is beginning to bear fruit, and we think that kids are stabilizing within the school and not needing to go out. We've seen that over now the first semester. We can't forget that we do have a pre-K-8 population as well, where we still see some movement in that domain. We also have our OTPT costs, which have kind of historically been underfunded anyway. We've tried to bump a little money into there to bring it more in line with what we actually need in that account. And then we have a slight increase in the contract service hours. So the hourly rate has gone up slightly. And we work with rehabilitation associates in town. They've always provided us a tremendous rate for the work they do for us in the OTPT arena. But they need to pay the bills too. So there's a slight increase in that account. So some of the increase is just for an increase in cost, and some is a slight readjustment for a historically underfunded account. So that really accounts for the bulk of that $800,000.
The savings, the increased costs of the consulting that is resulting in the reduced high school population, what is that number if we wanted to compare it against the 645?
That's slightly less than $650,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else you want to say on that issue? Questions from the board on that change of service methodology, I guess you would call it? Questions from the board on that topic?
So if you want to see the other tuition, the whole tuition breakdown in more detail, it's on page 90. If you want to see the other tuitions we pay, that's just if you'd like to look at that at your leisure. Utilities was the next topic. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Donna.
Ms. Cornell?
Thank you. Through the chair to Andrea. And I know this is a program that we just started. Have we started tracking how many people are not having to be outplaced as a result of the services we're putting in, or is it just too early because we're starting it?
Well, we're still, I would say we're still in startup, so we're still beginning and working with families, bringing them into the service. We have had a tremendous response from the kids who are receiving the service. Their grades are improving, their attendance is improving. We have had, of the kids who are receiving the service, we have had only one student end up being hospitalized, which is significant for that family, for all of the families, because these kids have experienced a lot of significant issues over the past couple of years. One of the benefits of this program that we're seeing is we're also seeing our own school psychologists, social workers, and school counselors being more able to intervene early with kids who aren't in such deep levels of distress. So we're hoping, or we're anticipating, or we're, Karen, hypothesizing that we'll see some real benefits in that as well. But we have not had to place a student out of district. And in fact, we've actually been able to bring a couple of students back to district and are anticipating a couple of more returns to district for the start of the September semester. So right now, we're very optimistic We're seeing really great data, and at the end of the year, we'll be able to report back to the board about, all the kinds of things that we've seen. But right now, things are continuing month by month to be very positive.
And we have enough services, hopefully the population of the students using it, but will we have enough services if the population of the students needing it?
Were to increase? Well, with the contract and with ESS, we'd be able to increase the level of service to meet more student need.
Okay.
Right now, we have the capacity to do this intensive work with about 45 students, 18 at each high school and 9 at the Walter Fitzgerald campus. So we have about 45 student capacity. If we needed more, then we'd contract for more support from them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, on to utilities.
Okay, I think we have to go to the detail pages to get into this a little bit. So, page 46. Maybe Tom or maybe Doreen. Calculating utilities for this district is quite tricky. But basically, we have put more square footage online year over year, and we've also started more mechanical means of fresh air and air conditioning in these places. And we anticipate additional utility costs, obviously, because we think we're going to be adding 2 portables at Holland Hill next year, and they have to be heated and service run there. We added space at obviously at Riverfield, considerable amount of square footage there. We added space at and air conditioning at the whole building at Riverfield. Ludlow High School, we added square footage and mechanical means of fresh air, right? And so those were the big ones. We do have built in some of the savings from the solar at the 2 high schools. That is calculated in. And the rates have gone down, and we've been doing these utility projects to reduce it. But basically, the biggest thing that's happening is that we're adding square footage, and we're adding more equipment. What did I forget on there, Tom or Doreen? Yeah. I'm sure I missed something. That's the short answer.
Fairfield Woods Middle School had added square footage, almost 16,000 square feet. Ludlow High School, almost 12,000 square feet, and Riverfield, almost 18,000 square feet. And we added an HVAC unit to Osborne Hills Gym that never had it when we renovated that gym.
Do we put mechanical means of fresh air?
Mechanical means of fresh air is a whole mechanical system for Riverfield.
Yep.
And it will be proposed for Holland Hills. It's coming up. So these are old elementary schools that only had exhaust systems.
Right. Thanks. That's pretty much the answer.
Okay, any general any questions on the utilities calculations that any board member has that might want to ask at this time? Of course, you can, if you think of something, you can ask it during your 10-minute segment, too.
All right.
Ms. Maxon Finale.
Just one quick follow-up. This is one of the questions I'd submitted. But so then on line or item 311, the utility services, the going down of 59,000, despite greater square footage, you attribute to more efficient machines and the use of solar. That's where we would see those savings.
Yes.
Because I'd been questioning the solar. So
Right. Solar, but the high schools will save us, decent amount of money. The elementaries aren't in yet, and we weren't sure when they were going to go in. I mean, they're approved and so forth, but they don't really save a ton. I mean, it's a very small number, relatively speaking, but every little bit helps. But that's where the more energy efficient light bulbs that you've heard of those projects. And we're doing everything we can to conserve, but some of that gets outdone when you add air conditioning and square footage.
thank you.
Yep. The last explanation I want to give is on pages 128 to 131, we budgeted elementary classroom teachers a little differently than we have done in the past. We keep getting burned by budgeting exactly to the student, and then having new students move into the district just in the wrong places. And one of the reasons this year we had to add so many teachers was because we had move-ins to the district and we had to hire 5 elementary teachers. And it just seemed to me that it doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you know you've got all these classes that are within one of being split to keep going, because you know you're setting yourself up for a problem. And so we calculated it differently. The elementary enrollment overall is projected to go down by 83 students. But if you budget it 16, 17, exactly the way we did it in the past, you actually come up with a negative 12 teachers. Well, common sense would indicate that with 83 students, you shouldn't be going down 12 teachers. And the chances of us actually realizing that are slim to none. And we don't want to be in a position of having to add 5 or 6 teachers next year, because it's very hard to cover that kind of a thing. So I just wanted to be clear about what we did. And the reason this looks different is that what we did was anywhere there was a student, or there was a projected class that was 1 or 2 below creating a new section. Look, for example, at Holland Hill. Holland Hill has the 4th grades projected to have 325s. 1 more student, and that gets split. So kind of why wait for that? As invariably it happens. And they have a 2nd grade, if we add 2 students, they'll have to split. So we added back a teacher for that. So anywhere you see a yellow or a green, we added a teacher. And those are calculated over to the right in yellow and green. And then in one instance, we have one class that if one student moves out, that class will get collapsed. And that's Dwight's projected 1st grade. So we subtracted that, took that out. And so that's, the net of all that is 7, so that we budgeted for a -5. That's, remember my presentation, we budgeted -5 for elementary teachers. And that's where it came from. So, you know, you could budget -12, and then you run a huge risk that you're going to need to add 5, 6, 7 teachers next year. Oh, it's not prudent. So we were very clear about how we did it and what the math on it was. And I just wanted to point that out. That's how the budget was built.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
So just on that methodology, so this is for budgeting purposes only. Are you actually
Right.
going out and hiring the budget, or like how do you?
Right,
How are
so
you
there-
actually right?
Yeah, so this is for budget purposes only. We monitor this, obviously, throughout the spring and into the summer. And decisions are made in the middle of August based on enrollment changes that have happened. So in the event that, say, that 1st grade at Dwight, let's suppose that, you know, middle of August, near the end of August, that's still 15, 16, 16, we don't collapse it just because the budget says collapse it. That would stay intact. So we apply the class size guidelines at the last possible moment based on the actual enrollment at the time. This is really just a way to budget it. So at the same time, if you're a Holland Hill parent, you shouldn't be saying, aha, you know, we're definitely going to have 4 sections in grades 2 and 4 next year. That's only if the numbers dictate that. And just like at Dwight, you shouldn't be worried, oh my God, they're going to collapse it. That's only if the population actually shifts that way. Does that do it? Okay, good. I'm glad you asked that, because people could get nervous.
I could see people just starting to say, "Oh my God, they're going to collapse it."
They're going to collapse it. Right. So we apply the class size guidelines, you know, at the last possible minute and hire accordingly. That's it for me.
Ms. Carnell.
Through the chair to, I'm not sure who can answer this, but have anybody looked at this again as a result of GE moving out of our wonderful town?
No, this was done based on the October 1 enrollment. There's little way to get a handle on exactly what that's going to mean to us and the timing of that. So obviously we couldn't take that into account. This budget, you know, these projections were done back in October. We will get some projections from Malone and McBroom in February which I don't know how that will compare to this. They're a little more recent, but I don't think we'll see a big difference. I'm really just trying to cover us in the event that we get our usual 2 or 3 kids move into a school and they happen to always be at the class that we have to split it, which is what happened this year.
Is that it, Ms. Cornell? Okay. So, on to the round robin, 10 minutes of worth of questions per board member. You don't have to take the whole 10 minutes, and we'll use that as a guide so that I can move around so that all nine of you have an opportunity to ask questions. And again, aiming at around 9:30 to go to the public and then back to the board to see if there's any further conversation you want tonight. And if not, then we'll move on to the next Tuesday's meeting. Not in any particular order, but who would like to start with some questions? Mr. Patton.
Could I just make a comment or request of the chair? Is it possible or easier to maybe, again, start numerically and say, pages, whatever,
There's a
20 to
variety of
25
methods to do it, and this, for me, is just a way of making
Anybody?
sure that every board member has equal opportunity.
Understood. Take it away.
So that doesn't mean you want to start.
It does not.
Okay. Who wishes to start with any questions for the staff on the budget?
Well, I guess we're done.
Do I have a motion for, do I have a motion for adjournment?
Was that
No.
good? Was that clear? Excuse me. Jennifer.
Thank you, Ms. Maxon Kennelly.
Okay, I had seen that several of my questions had been duplicated by a few other board members, or at least in conversation, so I'm going to get to the ones that only I had in hopes that they ask theirs and I get that answer then. And a lot of my questions, while I'm finally, after, on my 5th go-around, getting a better grasp, I know I get a lot of questions, so I want to be able to answer those. So I'm going to go in page order, because that's the order I did my questions in. Page 15, which talks about the cultural competency and the state mandate. I actually already had one question, and it was a question that sort of was similar to my own, which is, how does that come with any financial, again, I think it's always good to know of any educational state mandates that are coming down to us, but to say this description sounds like something we're already doing or education already is. I was wondering what kind of financial impact comes with this.
Just ends up in Andrea's department, as it turns out.
I think Andrea should probably just stay at the table.
That's fine. She loves it.
Concise answers will help
I will
Jennifer.
do my best. The legislation requires that every school district plan for and map a culturally competent social and emotional learning curriculum. And while we have places in different parts of the core curriculum, particularly like in the health classes, that deal with pieces of SEL work, advisory at the high school and newly coming in advisories at the middle school, there's no real map across the district. So the fiscal impact of this is not necessarily in buying something new. It's time with teachers and time with a group of stakeholders to really map what's happening pre-K through 12 in this arena, and then understanding how we embed this in the course of the curriculum. Because we don't take social and emotional learning class. Right? So we need to embed that. And so what we're looking to do is to create a framework so we understand where different SEL skill sets are taught, where they're encouraged, what is age-appropriate SEL work. And then the other piece of cultural competence is challenging the status quo. So when you do that, you need to bring in some folks who challenge your thinking. And you look at what's happening culturally, in the community in the country right now. One of the things that would be a hotbed for us to challenge ourselves as a community on is addressing issues of immigrants and refugees and religious pluralism and those kinds of things. So if you put 100 people in a room and said, do you have any issues with race or religion, or most people would say no. And yet we have a country that is suffering from a number of issues related to that. So we always have to bring some people to really push our buttons a little bit and open up that conversation when you're talking about cultural competence and social and emotional learning.
So you would expect, or I think we should expect then, that we're going to hear this phrase as we get the social studies curriculum, for example, that would be one place where it would be embedded.
I think it's going to start with the framework, and then we're going to begin to find where these things are taught and be able to point people specifically to where teaching occurs, where expectations increase as students get older in being able to accept new ideas and debate them freely without it turning into a negative, addressing those kinds of cultural competence issues across the curriculum.
And does part of the state mandate come with a reporting aspect? Are we having to say how we are fulfilling this?
Well, right now, it looks like we'll have to present a plan, but every year the legislation gets added onto, and so we'll present a plan. Typically, it will come before you for approval. It will have to be approved by the state, and then it'll sit in a drawer. So it's a process with legislation and bringing this to the forefront.
Okay.
This all started with the bullying legislation a few years ago, and these are just each year the legislature adds layers to this.
Okay.
You can see the fiscal impact of this and some other mandates that Andrea manages on page 86, under line 62, Pupil Personnel Services, Conference Staff Development District. We bumped that up last year because of the dyslexia mandate.
Yes.
Still, that's ongoing. So that budget used to be 20,000. This year, it's 80,000. Next year, it's 150,000. So you want to follow the money on the mandates? There it is.
Thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to know. I mean, in addition to everything else. Impact. All right, thank you. My next question is open choice. Is that Andrea also?
Actually, no.
Oh, okay.
Again, page number would
Yes,
always
so
be
page
helpful.
18. Actually, page 18 is where it's mentioned, and then the budget aspect is on page 22. So I had a couple of questions in terms of how the money was being spent regarding the open choice program, and I know it appears on yet another page. I don't have the, oh, I'm sorry, on page 24, I see that it's going towards what appears to be 2 staff members. And my question is in terms of benefit to the whole district, which I support the open choice program, but I'm curious, in their roles of enhancing and enriching programs, which is what open choice is doing, does this money also, how is it benefiting other students as well?
So I believe those are part-time. They're paying a portion of individuals at the elementary schools, right? Is that the right answer? MSTs, right. So this money used to come in as basically undesignated money when I first got here. And so it was sitting there. So in order to be fiscally prudent and transparent, I said, we need to tell people where we're going to spend it. And so when we added in MSTs in the first year I was here, we decided to partially pay for them out of this open choice because this money was undesignated. So in fact, we just make a partial part of the salary of the MSTs is at the elementary schools is paid out of this grant, and there's really not much more to it than that. And they're very flexible about how we use that. So actually, this benefits all the students because we're able to fully fund MSTs in every elementary school without having the board pay the full cost.
Okay, so then I'm unclear on why it references 2.0 FTEs.
That's what the totals. In other words, it's fractions.
Okay,
It's
so
a bunch of fractions.
we would see that more clear when we're actually going into the school-by-school breakdown.
Right. You'll see some
Okay.
people are in there, 0.83 paid out of the district, 0.17 paid out of the grant. What is it, 0.2, 10 schools. It's even simpler than that. Ann got rid of hundreds wherever she could. So it's basically how much money will it take? I mean, it might have been when we started this, it paid for 2.4, but as salaries have gone up and that number hasn't gone up, we've had to cut that back. It's been running around 180, 185,000 a year. It's not really gone up very much. So it was basically money that was coming in. It's always been coming in. It was never designated, and that's how we did it.
Okay, thank you. Next, crossing out something. Oh, go ahead.
If we have follow-ups on specific topics, should we do that now or come back later? How would you like
Ms.
to proceed?
Maxon,
I'm fine, go ahead.
Fine, follow-up?
So if our actual 14-15 open choice was 194,000, and it dropped to 180, did we have a lower number of open choice students? Because I thought our number had actually gone up.
The number varies. It depends how many kids are graduating, and then how many open seats there are, and then how many seats that CES manages this. We might have open seats in the school, but they don't have anyone to put them in. It's highly variable, so that's one part. The second part is that depending on the state's situation, which is always fluid, there's a bonus money that comes. And some years it comes, and some years it doesn't, and we can't quite figure out why. So we sort of budget at reasonably conservatively. And every once in a while we get a few extra bucks in there, but it has not moved around much over time. We've been pretty consistent with the number of open choice kids. It's 3,000 a kid, so we've been running roughly 60 open choice kids most of the time I've been here.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Maxon Connelly?
Yeah,
Just,
Same thing, you're
sure.
just one clarification on the open choice. So if we have about 60 kids then, and the cost per student is about 15,800, what we're saying is that we get a rebate from the state of 3,000 per student. Is that what page 18 says on the open choice?
So you're referencing the average,
Right.
right? And
I mean, I don't know how much each kid is actually, because I guess it'd be different depending on the services each kid uses, so.
well, not quite. But this is a little bit of economics 101, right? There's a difference between the average cost and the marginal cost. And that is, marginal cost is, if one additional student comes, how much more does it cost us? Cost the district. Versus how much does the average student cost, right? Just if one more student shows up, if you've got, say, 3 kindergarten sections of 16 at a school, and we add 1 student to that class, our costs don't go up 15,000. Right? Costs go up next to nothing. We're not adding a teacher. We have plenty of materials. We have plenty of desks. Really costing us 0. So that 3,000 is a bonus to the district. It's not a net negative. It's a net positive, right? So we're very strategic about this. Right? When we tell CES where we have open seats, we will not open any open choice seats where we're anywhere close to the addition of that 1 student will cost us to have to add a teacher. We only take them in the early grades, kindergarten, 1st grade. So, in fact, as we take in open choice students into open spots, this is a net money positive for us. It's not a negative. It's not costing us $12,000 every kid we take in.
I think it's a matter of perspective, because you can never know if in fact there's another marginal kid, if there's 5 other kids that are going to move in, and that 5th kid now pushes us over. If we had had 1 less, we wouldn't have had to hire another teacher. It's kind of arguable, like which way you go. I mean, I'm just using average numbers just to keep the conversation simple. I understand the marginal discussion and
Right, well,
argument, but
it's-
you could say that
it's-
about any kid in the district.
That's
So
true.
since that's a point of argument, can I go back to Mrs.
Right, I mean, it's
Maxon
not
Connelly
like,
so she can get
I just
through
wanted
her
to
question?
understand, so that was really the concept, was that it was $3,000 of rebate to subsidize the cost of any incremental open choice student.
Right. It's a grant, not a rebate.
Oh, sorry, grant,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
And also, as a reminder, that's also why I asked the question, in what way is this money a benefit to all of our students? So that's
does.
just as another point. My next question was on page 33, and I was wondering about item 135, the increase in degree changes that we have that many faculty projected that they're going back for additional?
Yeah, so Ann, you can come up and do it. Ann does this, and we have a whole process for it, and it happens to be a year when a lot of faculty have told us they're going to have degree changes.
We'll save your throat a little bit.
Thank you.
So that's exactly what happens. We send out an email in September that staff have to respond to, letting us know if they're anticipating moving up a step, whether bachelor's to master's, master's to sixth year, et cetera. So we then actually budget the salary increase for that person, knowing what the step is for next year. We budget that amount. If by the time we start doing the budget in October, someone has not come forward, they come forward in December, oh, I forgot to reply to that. Sorry, you have to wait a year, because we actually budget the dollar increase for each. This particular year, we seem to have a lot of staff members who are anticipating completing their degrees either this June or in December. They can get a half a year increase as well, and we budget a half a year increase.
And just as a quick follow, and I don't know if you would know this, if it's purely a degree change, or is any part of this, do we have information on, is this going for administrator's degree, or is this going for greater expertise in their subject?
Yeah, it could be an administrator who's going from the salary schedule to a doctoral degree. We've had a couple of administrators doing that, and that would be calculated. There's a salary differential there as well.
I think you're asking about the programs that
Yeah.
they're in. They could be in administrative programs. They could be in
Correct.
programs going for dual certification in special ed. They could be in program to get a master's in their subject area. Any planned program that meets the parameters of the contract that Ann's approved. So it's a wide range. In fact, that's been a highly variable number. A couple of years ago, we dropped it way down. You know, we had like $100,000 would appear to be a windfall. So it just sort of goes and ebbs and flows.
But it is a more predictable number because it is staff members who are currently in classes in a program who are telling us, I think I'm going to be done by this time period. Now, if they don't finish, they're not paid the increase. So, it's possible that that number could come in lower. We just don't know yet.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to move on to another board member,
Okay.
according to my clock.
Okay.
Who wishes to,
Although I lost some of my time, but
But like Congress, the answers
Yes.
take.
it's fine.
and yes, if a board member has the answer they want, feel free to let the staff person know, I understand, I have another question.
Right.
They won't mind not having to go on. Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, through the chair to Dr. Title, I just wanted to go back.
Page number?
Well, it's just kind of a general
Okay.
question regarding the new health insurance. I just wanted to get a sense of, I know this was something I think that came out of when you were meeting with other superintendents in the state when you first heard of this. So I was just curious, is this something that this is just starting this year, that it's available to school districts? So this is the first time that any school district can take advantage of this, is that correct?
Yes, the legislation that allowed this to happen went into effect October 1st.
Okay.
And so then the state rolled out the plan. So technically, if a school district was really on the ball and could move all of their people over, you conceivably could have joined it sooner, but realistically, July 1
Right.
is
Okay.
the earliest anybody could do it, and we had to move rapidly to hit that. So it was legislation from the last session. So yes, it just became available.
Okay, and then just out of curiosity, do you know, are any other districts looking into this? I mean, you don't have to say who they are. I was just curious if anyone
Let's just
else
say that
was.
Doreen has received a lot of phone calls.
Okay.
I will also say that at my last executive board meeting of the Superintendent's Association, they made a presentation, the state made a presentation to all those superintendents and gave them the background, so I'm sure they went back and having people look into it. But looking into it and then getting all your ducks in a row and getting approvals and getting all the questions answered people have in the time that we did it in is much faster than most places can do it. So yeah, there's a lot of people. I think Doreen's been flooded with inquiries.
And we're charging a consulting fee for your
Right.
telephone time?
Yeah, we've got all the tough questions.
Other questions?
Yeah, well, I guess then just moving on to a different topic. It's mentioned on page 9, and I think it's mentioned somewhere else as well, just talking about the TIPS reporting system. I just was curious. I know that was something that we had a lot of discussion about, that we gave a presentation, and I'm just kind of curious to see kind of where we are now. I mean, it seemed to me as if it was viewed as being as a success, and this is something that we want to continue moving forward as it is now, so there isn't any need for an expansion or a reduction. And I was just curious also if you had any sense of, how much time that is this creating a tremendous amount of more work, or is it actually helping kind of streamline the process, perhaps? I just wanted to get a sense of that.
The TIPS program is our anonymous or discrete reporting system that we implemented about a year ago. We implemented in about March of last year. And it has been a very positive addition to our work in school safety, in bullying prevention, in intervention, in a number of ways. For any of you who have been on the site, we really are we're opening up opportunities for students, parents, community members, staff members to report to us either anonymously or discreetly on a number of issues. And we've had great, I don't know if successes is the right word, but kids are using it, families are using it. We're getting reports both anonymously. About 40% of the reports we get are anonymous. The rest are discreet, and they give us their names and contact information, which allows us to do further investigation with them, which has always been helpful. So we do encourage that, but certainly about 40% are anonymous. We have identified students in need of supports who are struggling. Their friends have said, I'm worried about my friend, and that's been helpful. We've had bullying reports. We've had a number of different reports where kids are seeking help for other kids. So, I see it as a great success for very little money, so we're continuing it at the same level. We did some updated training in the fall just to maintain our follow-up procedures, and in terms of workload, I think we're getting reports in a new way, but it hasn't been an explosion of, remember we were a little worried that it was just going to be this explosion of reports. It hasn't. The reports come in here and there, but
But
so
perhaps they've simply shifted from when there were other ways that students or parents or faculty could say something. Now, instead, it's just going all to this one.
No, we still have the same number of people who will give us a call, or a kid who will go see a staff member. This just gives that one additional way for the kid who might be for the student who might be a little reticent, or the family who doesn't, who's maybe heard something but doesn't want to step too into someone else's business. So.
And then I guess just in terms of, so I guess you said about 60% are anonymous and 40 are discreet?
About 40% are anonymous.
40, okay. So in any event, but with the anonymous ones, obviously, when you present this to us and we discussed it, one concern was that it was perhaps going to result in things that couldn't be followed up on because you didn't have anyone to check with. Has that been an issue, or actually has it turned out to be not a problem, and that there are still able to be ways to help with situations even if you don't have a specific person to talk to?
Having an anonymous report is always more difficult.
Right.
It makes the investigation, often you don't get enough information to really start an investigation, but everything is investigated to the best of its ability.
Right.
We still encourage people to report to us discreetly so that we can follow up with them with questions, which often helps us. But we investigate every single thing that's reported to the level we can, given the information reported to us.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Let's see, I think page 38, 39. For professional technical services. I know in previous years we've gotten a breakdown of legal fees. Would it be possible to get that information?
Sure. You're looking for, when was the last one? Did we send one out for the 14-15 year, Doreen?
Yeah,
And if I can ask a question, the format that was used the last time, you're thinking of the same format?
Yeah, I
So like
have it somewhere
like an
in all
update,
this.
like an update for the current year, is that what
Yeah.
you're thinking?
Yeah, just to kind of get a sense.
Right. So I think the best way to do that might be, if this makes sense, you might have missed this, but we didn't do the quarterly update at the last meeting, which is through December 31st. when we have that on the agenda to do at the next regular board meeting.
The quarterly financial.
Right, the quarterly
Right.
financials, so maybe Doreen could go over that at the same time. Does that make sense? Or do you want to do it like next Tuesday? Just a question of which
It would be
meeting.
helpful to get it before.
Okay.
If it's possible. I mean, somewhere in this pile of paper, I do have the one from last year. I could
Right.
show it to Doreen or whoever
Okay.
would like to see. It was
Put it on the
pretty-
to-do list.
We'll put it on the Q&A document that's being generated.
Thank you. And then I guess just, this is in regards, just a general question about maintenance. And that's not in the executive set, right? That's a separate, oh, no, here we go. I'm sorry, page 47.
No, everything's in the executive summary, just a question of
Sorry.
how much detail.
Yes, page 46, 47. Just in terms of the maintenance projects, because I know that we have had a big, that there is an increase this year. And I just thought it might be helpful if there's some, and I don't know if Tom Cullen has this or would be able to do it if it's not too much work, but just a sense of the ongoing list of maintenance projects throughout the district, just kind of where we are and because I know a lot of the times you've said that, Tom will come to you with a whole laundry list of things and you'll cut it down, but it might be helpful for us just to get a sense of how many more are in the queue. I mean, it doesn't have to be totally specific, but just to get a sense of kind of what's...
How big is the backlog?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying to get at?
So, yes.
I'm sure, Tom, we can come up with the next 20 on your list and send it out.
Right, just to kind of see the bigger picture.
Right.
That
Yeah.
would be helpful.
Yeah, we can do that. That's what he asked for but didn't make it in here. Department.
Tom's wish list, is that what you're going to title it?
It's not a wish list. Not a wish list. They're all legitimate.
Yes, they are.
But the buck stops somewhere, and it stopped here. So, yeah, I mean, you think about,
Wait a second.
Go ahead.
Next question?
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Will he
Don't let me start on that.
finish?
2 million square feet
Okay.
I ask a
maintaining.
quick follow-up to that?
Yeah, sure.
Please do.
You couldn't get out of it.
You would ask a question on this page as well.
Yes, it's also on maintenance
Get off
page,
his time.
page 47. So there's roughly a $500,000 increase. So I had asked a question about, is this, we had stuff that really needed to get done and we couldn't wait, so we had to spend $500,000 more, or things went up, or in other words, normally you try and keep things fairly flat and just fit as much of the bucket list into the, into
So
the
you
pie
have
as
to go,
possible.
we have to go into a little more detailed pages of what's on there, because that maintenance services, as you can see down below, it has a lot of items that are included there.
Right.
Right,
So,
so
it
if
was
you-
kind of more of a general question.
Yeah,
like we
so-
spent a little more than we anticipated, I guess. I don't know.
Well, no, it's as I mentioned, we have some of these accounts that really have been in need of beefing up, and we've just been holding back on doing them because the budgets have been so tight. So there's a number of maintenance services that get included on there. The major maintenance projects are just one of them. Major maintenance projects are going up. I forgot what the number is, a couple $100,000 total. But also, this is where the painting, the plowing, the paving accounts are all going up because we just can't keep up with the work in those areas. There's just too much need and not enough money to go around.
That's correct. We answered your question, and we'll get you the detail, but the difference in just the projects from last year to this year is comes to $182,687. So that's just the difference from the request last year for maintenance projects and the request this year. So the rest of the increase is all under all the maintenance accounts. There's over 30 of them. So they're preventive maintenance, would be refuse removal, extermination. When you look at all of those, they go up a little bit, depending on the contract with the town and everything.
So the quick answer
There's
is, like you said,
leases
it's
in
more
there.
across the board.
There's also leases in there for the maintenance department, so it's across the board. But I did break out just what the project amount is, and you'll
The
be able
large
to
ones,
see
yep,
that.
that's, I did, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Didn't mean to
Back to
take up
Mrs. Gerber.
Gerber's time.
Okay, page 11, this could be a really quick answer. Under school climate
Hint.
bullying. No, the last sentence says funds for an electronic system are in the budget. Is that tips? That is. Okay,
Yes.
thanks. And then another question, page 12, under the teacher and administrator evaluation. The last sentence, moreover, we must administer surveys to parents and teachers as part of this system, which will take time to develop, administer, and analyze, but we have not included additional funds for a survey. So I guess, how will that survey get done? If there aren't additional funds?
Because it's 2 years ago, made a decision for budgetary reasons to not spend the approximate $25,000
Right.
that would cost to have a third party
Yes.
develop a survey for us. And
So we're continuing in
we're
that
continuing with that.
direction. Okay.
And one of the reasons we want to continue with that is that if we give the exact same survey again, then we actually can get comparative data, because we'll get the exact same questions that we asked 2 years ago, and we can now start to see trends. If we switched to a third-party survey, that would be really hard to make those comparisons. So we want to see some longitudinal data there, and it costs more money.
Right.
And I have complete confidence that Andrea and her committee can handle it again.
Okay, so we're just staying the course with what we've
We're
been doing.
staying the course. That's so it doesn't show up as a cost to the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Can I move on to the next
Yes.
person?
May I follow up very quickly with that? I had thought this was a different survey. What you're describing, is that just the school climate survey?
Oh, I'm sorry. The school climate survey is something. I'm sorry. That's correct.
The answer is
The answer
correct,
is-
but not for this topic.
Yes. Well, the answer is also true for this topic, because Ann does that, and that's the same answer. That we developed our own, and we're using it, and we want to use the same one so we can do comparative analysis on it. So I answered about school climate, but I believe it's also true for the administrator, the parent and teacher survey, and now the student survey that we're doing this year, right?
Yeah, that's different, not online.
Right. Okay. So yes, we basically these are homegrown.
Who wishes to, Ms. Pitko?
I just want to say first, I want to thank Dr. Title for having the brown bag luncheon, because being new to this budget process versus my own school district, I learned a lot and had a lot of questions. I also want to thank anybody in the audience who came to the brown bag luncheon. It was nice to see and meet some of the people that are invested in our school district. My question actually, if you turn to page 126, and I'm sorry, Andrea, it's directed towards you, if you could come up. Looking at the projected enrollment, I understand how we do pre-K at Burr and Dwight. I'm curious how we project for the ECC.
For the ECC, because it has rolling admissions,
Yeah.
and students start with us upon their third birthday all throughout the year, we do a 5-year rolling average.
Oh, okay.
So we don't take the highest number in June, but we take the 5-year rolling average of the October 1 number.
So, and I have no background information to go with this, but is it possible we'll grow out of the location of the ECC?
You know, we question that a lot. We haven't yet,
Okay.
but we're seeing slight increases over the past couple of years, so we're monitoring pretty carefully.
Okay.
Well, one point on that would be that currently we have children with disabilities there. We also have tuition students there. And so if the number of students that we're mandated to serve with disabilities grows and we start to run out of space, then we would simply need to reduce the number of tuition-based students to go, because we can't turn away anybody who's identified on their third birthday. We haven't had to do that, but that's always the factor we can consider if we get into a pinch.
So the chair to Dr. Title, how is there a state law to how many students who receive services to the tuition-paying students? It's pre-K, so I don't know. I know
Right.
K through 12.
Go on, Andrea, I'll take it.
There's no legislation that sets the percentage of students with disabilities versus students without disabilities at the preschool level. The target is to stay at or under the 50-50 range, 50% of students with disabilities and 50% of students without. And that's where you want to be, because you want to bring the models and have models of great play and great language for the kids at the preschool area. That being said, In the absence of additional space, if budgets were such that additional space, that our students with disabilities numbers increased, and we had to tighten up the spaces for children without disabilities, and no other budgetary options were available, that would be discussed here. We would certainly come to the table with a proposal to gain additional space to meet that, it's not a mandate, but to meet that best practice standard. But that would be discussed here and decided by the town.
There's no mandate.
Okay.
There's a possible way to reconfigure some space over there if we had to add another classroom. We talked about that a little bit during our budget review with the staff from ECC. So we think that if we needed to, it would be a tight squeeze, but we think we could add another classroom there without compromising the rest of the students. So we think we got a little more wiggle room there than might be apparent just walking through it.
Well, and having the two preschools that we also have at the other two schools would buy us some options as well. So there's a long way to go before we need to be raising even yellow flags.
It's not a yellow flag yet.
Right. Okay.
Any further questions on any other topic? Who would like to go next? Mr. Patton.
I just hopefully like to quickly move back to our favorite topic, health insurance again, and this new 2.0 program with the state.
And the page number, so that those of us that you want to
It's more along the lines of, hold on a second. It's more general questions, but the health insurance line is in page 34. So I'm hoping that I think this is simple, and I'm just not understanding how this program works with us, because I have like over half a dozen questions on stuff here that Dr. Tuttle didn't really go over. Under the new plan, are we still self-insured?
No.
That answers half of the questions.
So
that's why we don't have to worry about IBNRs and all that stuff, because we don't have to worry about that there's money left over because we're not paying anything.
Correct.
That also is related to we don't need a stop loss coverage,
Correct.
Extra insurances, et cetera. And so all those removals of all those things, the end consulting fee, all that stuff is all figured into the new budget, all those savings.
The new rates include all the elements of the health insurance plan.
Got it. Okay. Just make sure that was pretty much. And that, again, related to the stop loss, so that we don't have to worry about, since we don't have these insurances, the state is just going to cover no matter what the claims are, whether we have, extra, $300,000 claims, $500,000 claims, or $5 claims. It's just one plan. It's just covered it like.
We're essentially, it's like
plan.
being fully insured. From our perspective, it's fully insured. We pay X dollars. It goes into the big pool. If there's excess claims, the state merges them in with all the other claims. And because you're smoothing out these big claims and small claims over 200,000 people instead of 1,400 people,
Right.
it washes them out. In fact, when the state met with us, they don't even carry a stop loss. It's such a big pool, they don't need it. Is that correct? Yeah. So they don't have it. That's not our problem.
Got it. That's what I was hoping I was misunderstanding. So in relation to just hopefully maybe this won't be the last time it's brought up, but the excise tax, if heaven forbid it triggers in 2020, I don't want to say it's more of the state's problem because it's our problem as an individual municipality, but if we're on a state plan, they're going to, or in theory, you'd think that they would be looking at it from a whole state of Connecticut thing in terms of are we in, have a greater plan than we should.
Right.
Because now we're on the same plan that kind of everybody in the state. or
Everybody who's in that,
employees who
right.
are in that.
Yeah, there's one plan, and we wouldn't be treated any differently under that than anybody else.
Okay. All right. Enough of health insurance.
Before you leave health insurance, if I could ask a follow-up. Under our contracts, we are allowed to change plan providers, as long as it is, quote, substantially equivalent. but we took the step of going to each of the unions and asking if they were on board with this. And I wonder, Dr. Title, if you could explain the rationale for taking that step.
Okay, so all of our union contracts, the board has the unilateral authority to implement coverage or a carrier that is deemed to be substantially equivalent. Substantially equivalent can be debated. You could have no two plans are exactly the same. You can have differences in plan design, what's covered, what's not, at what percentage, what the premium cost, what the co-pays are, what the deductibles are. This plan has this massive wellness plan in it. Our current plan doesn't. You're looking at provider networks that are changing, so some doctors are in and some doctors are out. You can have network coverage issues. And you're looking at 3 different plans. You're looking at medical, prescription, and dental, all of which are obviously slightly different in one way, shape, or form than the current plan. So it's often a debatable point. And while we could unilaterally switch and just say, well, that's tough. If you don't like it, fight it. That's usually not a good strategy because we're much better off working through any questions the bargaining unit members may have about this, because the recourse that bargaining units have, should we take sort of that hard line and just say we're doing it tough, their recourse is to file a grievance and say, you know, you've unilaterally acted in contrary to the contract. This is not substantially equivalent. And that would put us into the grievance arbitration process. It would, in addition to running up our legal fees, you run the possibility of losing, and it would take months and months and months for that to play out. So even if you were to win, and you could be possibly fighting 7 grievances, since we have 7 bargaining units, and if we lost in any one of them, we probably wouldn't want to switch everybody over, because that's a whole other set of complications. You don't want to leave one group on the self-insured plan, everybody else over. It just wouldn't work. And we would, in any case, even if we won all of them, we wouldn't be able to implement it for 16, 17, because by the time all of that played out through all of the different bargaining units, you know, it would be at least another year. So we would be foregoing all of this savings. So rather than do that, we basically engaged our employees in examining this and saying, hey, this looks like a good deal for everybody, answered all their questions, held a number of meetings, and at the end of the day, we got the word that were the board to implement this plan, they would not grieve it. And so technically, we didn't have to ask. But we worked on it collaboratively, and as a result, we have an outcome that saves the district $3.5 million. We used very minimal legal services to get this, and the employees were involved in the decision and support it, and as a result, we end up in a really good place as rapidly as possible, instead of ending up in grievance arbitration.
Thank you. You had another topic you want to go to.
Laundry list here. I'll start in order on the income side page. This is more like a general request that I'm sure folks are working on this already. Page 11 to 15 on the state mandates. Is there a way, roughly, that we could monetize what each mandate costs us in this budget? At least the new ones that are mentioned here? That now, I mean,
yeah.
they could do that by next week? Or
in some cases, you can. By monetize, you mean, I think a monetized meeting, like you're a business and you're operating something and you're trying to make a profit on it. So that's not what you mean by monetize, right? You mean attach a cost.
Yeah, attach a cost, the impact to the budget.
Each of these.
By, you mentioned one earlier.
Yeah, I pointed out one area. We'll give it a shot. Some of it is just so hard to really put your hands on, because there's a lot of it is time of existing personnel that's redirected into dealing with the mandate, as opposed to doing something else that might be more productive in the district. So there's an opportunity cost of the time. It doesn't necessarily show up in the budget. And the classic example of this is teacher and administrator evaluation. All right? we didn't spend a lot of money developing these systems because it was done in-house. But, you know, the amount of hours that were put in on this and the amount of hours our administrators are putting in to conduct these observations with, you know, at the building level, in most cases, no additional help, you know, far outweighs the direct costs of this. So we'll give it a shot, but, you know, in a lot of cases, you just can't follow it through right to the line in the budget. But where we can, we'll point that out.
Right. I mean, as ballpark as you can, and if it, like you
Right.
said, if it's you know, redirecting staff time, then you can just say that, and that will make perfect sense. Page 22, under income grants. So we had a grant for technology for the last 2 years from the SBAC assessments. Was there, and this year, we got it 2 years in a row, and then this year there's zero. So I guess my question is, was there a grant to apply for? And if so, did we apply for it, or was there just no grant to ask money for, or we've kind of dried out that well?
Well, there was a grant, and we did apply. And believe we've been approved. However, this grant requires that the State Bond Commission release the money, because the state bonded money for this grant. The State Bond Commission seems to be rather uninterested in approving additional bonding projects, this one in particular. And so Nancy and myself have been hounding legislators and whoever to, can we get the bonding commission off the dime, because once they do, then that will free up some money. We don't know how much, because they can always give you less than you ask for, but we've met all the requirements. And so it could be, you know, next month, it could be never. So at this point, we can't count on it, so we didn't budget for it.
So you took it out of the budget.
Well, it's not really in the budget in the sense that it would be extra, you know, above and beyond what we've added in here, because you can't supplant with these grants. Supplant meaning you can't just reduce your budget and insert this in as a substitution.
Right, I mean, you're not buying less.
The state
whatever,
looks very dimly on that.
iPads for.
Right. So we put in for specific, you know, projects, and that has to stay that way, because it has to be a supplement. And we're just waiting for the state, which is like waiting for Godot.
Follow up.
Oh, this is an
Next
English
subject?
teacher. Was that the
No,
the
this
Godot reference?
is not about Godot.
Don't ruin it, because they're going to want to know if Godot actually comes or not.
Before Dr. Title starts talking about Godot any further, another subject?
May I follow up on that, Mr. Dwyer?
What, Mrs. Godot, or?
No. My question was, you discussed that as a supplement. So what is the program we are now not implementing because that money has not been freed up?
Okay, so Nancy's going to explain what she put in for in the grant.
What we applied for is sort of a grant supplementing a grant. Back in 2009, there was a grant called ARA, that was the American Reinvestment Act, or I don't know exactly what the whole an acronym stood for.
Closer to the mic.
And we bought what we called netbooks. There was pre-tablet kind of mini laptops that allowed us to get them into the hands of special needs kids. But we also made sure that they were available to general ed kids as well. We needed to replace those last year, and we had not enough money to do all of them. So what we ended up with was a cart of 15 units at the elementary schools, and similarly at the secondary schools. And so what we wanted to do was get that to a classroom set. So I think if I remember off the top of my head, it was around $225,000 worth of additional tablets and laptop carts to tote those laptops around that we applied for. And as Dr. Title said, we applied, we did everything we needed to do, and we just been waiting.
Thank you.
And why don't you ask one more question?
All
We'll
right.
move on to another board member.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's do something interesting here. Page 37, line 307, other services. and again, you could provide this, or someone could provide this later if needed. You discussed that we were adding, due to the,
I think you mean page 39. I think you had a typo in your
oh,
questions.
that could very well be. You are correct, yes,
Yes,
page
right.
39, sorry. Dr. Hall, you talked about that, one of the things that we're increasing in the due to the long-range plan is extracurricular activities, I think at the middle school.
Yes.
Is there anything in there, I didn't see it, where we had any kind of inkling of what those things might be, or that's still on the drawing board?
That's still under discussion with the middle school principals, but it's basically clubs and activities, and each school's different. They may have different needs, different programs, because it's largely faculty-driven. Teachers want to offer a certain program, and we're not able to do it because we don't have the funding for it. So it varies depending on which middle school and what the interests are, both of the students and the staff. We're making somewhat of a deal about this, but this is about a $15,000 item. So we're not talking about tripling, the offerings here. This is a step in the right direction. But that will be, each school would determine that themselves.
And that would, we would.
Well, there's
know
no
that in the
determination
summer,
made
probably.
because right now it's a proposal. I mean,
Right.
it may never happen. So we'll wait till the budget's approved and then we can have a conversation
We'll have a
about
conversation.
what we're going to do with that.
Okay, I guess that's it for now.
Follow up?
I think you're double dipping on this
Hey,
follow-up. Go
I'm
ahead.
working this hard. But that was also one of my questions as well, so thank you, Mr. Patton, for covering it. But through the chair to Dr. Title, I don't want to put a staff member on alert, but this was something I was very intrigued by and very happy about. If there happen to be any middle school administrators here who might speak to areas of interest, I was wondering if you might be willing to call on said person.
I see said person out there. So this is
She's actually coming forward of her own volition.
well, she has a little choice. She's the only middle school principal here. So this is Sally Bonina. She's the principal at Tomlinson.
Good evening, everyone. As was
Again,
stated by
speak
Dr.
closer
Title,
to the mic for the
as
TV
was
audience.
stated by Dr. Title, each of us has separate wants and needs, all right? I can speak for our school, for Tomlinson, and at Tomlinson, there's been a very big demand for more homework club activities. We have a homework club. The present number that we have is overwhelming. So we do not have enough staff to service the children. All right, we have one idea that the children would really love to do is they'd love to have a chess club. That's something that we haven't had money for. We have a very large cross-country group, and we need more help with that group. So those are just three possibilities that we are looking at Tomlinson. And I know that both Meg Tiley and Gary Rosato have needs similar to ours with the cross-country, but different from ours in the other areas. Thank you. Okay.
Who wishes to go next? Ms. Carnell?
Page 10. In terms of the advanced placement, it looks like, we're trending up in terms of the enrollment. But I'm trying to understand that I believe it's a 4+ is where they get credit at school, at university. And again, it looks like the enrollment, but how many students are actually taking the test and getting the credits? So maybe for next time we can get a bit of a breakdown on this graph.
Right. I know it's an individual decision by the colleges as to what the cutoff is for credit. But I think we have provided in the past a breakdown of 3 and higher and 4 and higher. In fact, we put in the district improvement plan as a baseline, percentage of kids 3 and higher and percentage of kids 4 and higher as a target. But this graph, this is what the basis is for the AP honor roll. And to be honest with you, while obviously both are important, when you're expanding AP to students that are on the edge of do I take an AP or not, right? And we have faculty and the administration are encouraging these students to reach hard to get into an AP. If those students who are right on the edge, if they get a 3, that's a success story. Because otherwise they wouldn't be taking it at all. So, as you increase your numbers, having new kids taking the test or taking additional tests, if at the first run they get a 3, it's hardly a concern. It's actually that's a bonus. So, and that's going to happen. So, I think that's why the AP uses that as the cutoff. But I think in terms of credit, I think that varies. But I'm looking out at high school people to see if they want to lend any more clarity to this. No. Or it's a long way from the back of the room.
I know, I will only say that for my 2 students, my 2 children, they...
No, has it changed, I guess?
They got credit for the 3s that they had. And both of them walked into colleges with, one at NYU, one at University of Richmond, with I think 10 to 12 credits. It didn't stop them from taking more credits and still having to pay the tuition bill, but but they did. And so I would think that the guidance counselors might be able to give an anecdotal answer to that, but I'm not sure that we have the capability to be able to survey all of the colleges and know what their individual policies would be.
No, and I appreciate that. All kidding aside, and I know approximately how old your children are, I think it has changed. And I think the universities and colleges have gotten much stricter about accepting this credit. That's why. And maybe you can explain, if a student takes an AP, does not take the exam, or does take the exam and gets a 3, and I agree, Dr. Title, it's great that these students are being pushed, because I think that's wonderful. But how is it weighted on their transcript to the colleges or universities?
I'm not sure you mean, what do you mean by weighted, I guess?
So what you were saying is if a student is on the cusp and they're encouraged to take the AP class.
Right, they take the AP class, so they get, in the weighted system, they're taking a harder class, so they get a benefit in terms of their class rank based on the grade they get in the class. But the AP score has nothing to do with it. Is that correct? They're nodding, yes. So the score on the AP doesn't affect their class rank. The class rank is a GPA calculation.
We don't have class rank.
Right.
Does it impact their GPA?
Impacts their GPA, I'm sorry. So what Mr. Ebling was saying is that the GPA is based on the grades, and the grades are given a higher weight if you take a harder class. So they get the benefit of that, absolutely.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah, so there's a benefit. I think it's, the reason that we're pushing this, and this is not the only way to push kids, obviously, is not so much to get them credit so they can go in as sophomores in college and so on and so forth, but really is to push kids who we think are capable of doing higher level coursework and encouraging them to get in there and then giving them the support they need to be successful. We don't want to encourage someone to go in and then have them experience failure. So as we've gotten more and more kids in, we're still maintaining, some nice numbers. And that's why the AP District Honor Roll has named us to it for 3 years in a row.
Other questions, Ms. Cornell?
I just want to follow up. Is there a need for more staff, teachers, in terms of as the AP classes are offered and enrollment goes up?
So we have in the budget some additional staff for both in the academic area and the non-academic area. Some of it's in social studies where we think we are going to roll out some new higher level classes when the new curriculum comes in. Some are in the non-academic areas, but we always move staff around based on student need. So they may be in the budget, say, for, say, social studies. But suppose you have a lot of kids that unexpectedly take an AP class in another area, we may shift that position over to fill it if we don't need it in social studies. So we always wait until the student course selections come in, and then the curriculum leaders have a chance to analyze who's signed up for what courses and what we need for teaching load, and then they negotiate with me as to how many they actually get in each area. So, if we have, say, we thought 18 kids were going to take AP psychology. We have more than that, but just pick a number. But we only had 36. We're going to offer 2 sections of that, and we'll make sure there's a staff for it.
Thank you.
Ms. Lou McCormick wanted to follow up on that topic.
So related to the 4+, I think it is a reality that most schools now seem to require 4s and some even 5s, which is, so difficult. And I guess in this type of model, which I think is commendable, that we try to get more kids to take these classes, I guess it would be comforting to see that while doing this, we were also able to preserve or increase the numbers of 4s and 5s that we are seeing from the students. So maybe better to reflect than a percentage of students receiving 4s and 5s is just the absolute numbers. Have we been able to sustain or increase the performance of students receiving 4s and 5s while also adding 3s to the bucket versus having a downward shift to more 4s and 3s and a declining shift from 5s? So I think that's what the numbers might tell us and confirm that we are actually, really making it happen for all the kids.
Mrs. Gerber wants to make a comment on this topic.
Just one thing to keep
Wait
in
a second. Ms. Carnell?
Is that all right? Yes, sorry, thank you. Just through the chair to Dr. Title, this page number 10 here, the advanced placement results and the graph that you have here, for the 3rd year in a row, Fairfield was included in the College Board AP District Honor Roll for these results. The AP District Honor Roll, they use 3+.
Correct.
Correct. So that is why you have this in here, because
Correct.
it is based directly on the AP Honor Roll, which we have gotten as a district for the past 3 years. So that's why you have it laid out
Right.
this way, because that is how the AP gives the award, or gives the recognition, correct?
That's why we have it this way. It's also consistent with previous years, so people can go back and do comparisons. So we have 10 years of data in here
Right.
that
And
show.
we also did get AP scores broken down. We
Right.
had the
You-
link
you got that.
provided to the board
Right.
where we could look at every single AP exam taken by every single student at both of our high schools. So if we really wanted to go into the minutia of that, we'd be able to do that. But for this one page in the budget,
Right.
this is noteworthy because of the AP honor roll.
Right.
But we have received the information.
As a
The board
percentage.
has.
As a
So-
percentage, though.
No, we received the information of the test scores. Yes, we did.
And this is a budget meeting, so let us move on to other budget questions.
So
I think I'm finished because a lot of the questions I had have already been answered.
Okay. Who wishes to go next for their segment of time? Mrs. Lou McCormick?
Sure. Let's see, so if I go to the main page, page 31, I guess my first question relates to transportation. And transportation looks like it is up by, what, is that 173? So the .11 didn't seem like a huge increase, except when I turned to page, where is transportation? Page 41, which is item 317. And I look at the detail, and it occurs to me that we have a slight decrease in the population of our student body, and we have seen a huge decrease in the price of fuel. So, this would have been the year that I would have expected to see a flat transportation or even possibly a declining transportation number in a year like this. However, I see that inside the detail it says that there was a 2.5% increase in contractual rates, increases in outside transportation, magnet school transportation, a whole list of special ed transportation aids. So that must have been, I'm just wondering, if we hadn't had that decrease in fuel rates and we hadn't had the decrease in student population, how much of an increase would our transportation number have been? Because it seems like the decrease in the fuel costs was so significant. I mean, it's a huge benefit. It's making inflation negative across the country, so I am surprised that we are seeing an increase.
So the increase in that line, if you go back to page 31,
Yeah.
the increase in that line, it's alone, is that second column in from the right, 2.21%.
Yeah.
The 0.11 is,
That's a total.
what does that increase reflect as part of our overall budget? Of the 2.59, what fraction is it? So that line's going up about 2.2%. We do not anticipate, the way the students are breaking down in terms of the numbers, that we're able to reduce any regular ed buses. So while student population has been declining at the elementary level, it's also been growing at the middle school level. It's peaking at the high school level. So the net effect is we need to run the same number of buses that we've run every year. The contract has a 2.5% cost escalator in it. So right off the top of the bat, that account's going to go up 2.5%. And the number of buses has been the same on the regular ed side. We have seen an uptick in some of the special education transportation that we have needed to provide depending on individual student needs. So we have some additional, I think it's an additional wheelchair bus has to be budgeted for next year. Maybe Andrea can speak to this, as well as this account pays for bus aids for students that need an aid on the bus to make it safely to school in an outplacement.
The other piece that's included in the special education transportation is the requirement to transport students who are identified as homeless under McKinney-Vento. So at any point during the year, we might have a family who comes to meet with me in that role that I play, and we transport, as we are required to do under McKinney-Vento, that student from wherever they are living. If they're in a shelter, if they're living in with another family, that could be out of town, it could be anywhere. And if the parent chooses to remain in the school district, they are eligible to do so, and we must transport them. We often split that cost with the school district in which they're living, but that's a whole nother negotiation process. We are required to maintain. So some of those things that get lumped into special education are not just outplaced kids by us, but we have McKinney-Vento responsibilities as well. And that can be, that's what some of that private transportation, where Mr. Fickey might seek out some other form of transportation other than for a student and a bus.
Other questions?
Yes, so I'll go back. Is it possible to understand what the benefit of that 0.56 per gallon savings was?
It's about $100,000.
So it's only about $100,000.
We use about 200,000 gallons of fuel a year, so 112,000.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. And of the, so most of it is coming from the 2.5% increase in contract rates?
Yes.
Okay, and is that part of that 4-year or 5-year contract?
Yeah, that
every year?
contract has a built-in 2.5% each year. It's actually better. The previous contract had 3, so town got a better deal on this one. So we'll have one more year, and at that point, that contract will get bid. Full bidding process, and whatever happens, happens. But it's going to be 2.5 for 16-17. It'll be 2.5 for 17-18, and then there'll be a new contract in place.
And as a consideration for future budgets, have we ever considered retaining a transportation consultant to see if we can more efficiently do our transportation? Because it still is something that you can't help but notice, certain buses running almost empty frequently, and certain buses extremely full. So I'm not sure if we're doing as much as maybe we could if we had an expert in there analyzing the situation for us. Not clearly for this budget, but something to consider. I don't know how much it costs. I know there are a few really top-notch consultants in the field in the country, but would it be worth it since it's such a significant part of our budget?
We've actually done that a couple times. I know we did it when we went out to bid, when the contract was bid the last, like 2 or 3 years ago. We had a very well-regarded consultant examine that. Hate to even mention this word because I get a bad reaction when I say it, but this was looked at in the operational audit, and they determined that our total spending on transportation was right in line with what you'd expect for the student population this size. I think Mr. Fickey does an outstanding job of doing the best he can with the routes. That being said, we are upgrading our bus software. That was one of the recommendations from the consultant, to software that will do better computerized routing. And we're hoping that if we can get that in place, that we may see some benefit, to that. So that was really the big outcome from the consultant, was to upgrade your bus software, and that's being provided to us July 1.
Okay.
So we're actively on it. This is an area, to be honest with you, that as far as I'm concerned, any dollar I can spend in transportation is a dollar that can go somewhere else. So I have no incentive to keep this number higher than any more than it has to be.
Right.
I'm very reluctant to put any increase in here unless we absolutely have to have it, because this is just, an operational cost, and every single school district has the same problem with high school buses. We've been around the block on this how many times, and you have to run them, and they don't have that many kids in them, and or they're running all over town because we have 2 high schools in a big town. But we continue to look at it, I will tell you that.
Yeah, but
It's
just
not something we're ignoring.
Right. No, I think that's good. And in terms of the software, just as a suggestion to consider, I think I mentioned this before, some software that might allow us to have families opt out of busing transport. A lot of people drive their kids or have after-school activities that they go to. So even though we feel the need to provide, a lot of people may not need to take the service. So anyways, just a thought on that topic.
Yeah, and feel the need, it's a state requirement. It's not that we feel the need to provide transportation, it's a state requirement.
Well, it's a state requirement, but families can waive the availability. It is like if you read the state mandate, it's if reasonable, and it's needed. So I think there is some leeway that how we determine how many seats we need to make available. If people waive the need to take the bus, they can do so. Let's see. AP exam. I think a lot of stuff has been covered. Oh yeah, I was going to say, I did notice throughout this we've had of the increases that we've seen throughout the book. I know that there's a lot of the special education mandates that have been raised by the state, and kind of as Mr. Patton had raised. It would be nice to see that as a breakout, but I think even nicer would be to understand kind of the full impact of the mandates within the budget. I see that we have broken out our budget in terms of, on page 30, we have it broken out by kind of topic. But I think it might be also interesting, because it is such a significant part of our budget, to understand the trend that the state mandates have had an impact on our local budget. Because I think this is something that maybe is being seen across many districts, perhaps in the state, perhaps across the country. And I think it would be nice to understand how it is within Fairfield. I don't think we've ever really seen it laid out on a single page, kind of how the trend has evolved over time, and I think that would be helpful to understand the allocation of resources to this area, which is so important and mandated by the state, including the amount that we actually get rebated, I don't know, rebate's not the right word, back from the state at the end of the day, so we can understand where things are headed in the future. Because from a risk management perspective, if this area continues to grow from a mandate perspective, this is a very real thing that we have to prepare for. So if that's possible, I think that would be very much appreciated, I guess, next week.
I'm not necessarily clear on what the request is, so
A
the
breakout.
impact, I know Mr. Patton asked about the impact on the mandates, and could we identify where in the budget these occur? So we'll do our best for that, even though that's a little shaky.
I would
Wasn't
refer-
sure what the other
So like what the
request.
total percentage of special education spending is within our budget?
So if
That's
you look
kind of
on
a-
page 123,
Okay.
this is a new page that is not perfect, but the staff went through considerable effort to try and put a page in here that says, how much do we spend on programs? And so if you look on line 1200, special education, that gives you, here's what we spend in total on special education. You might want to be in touch with Dr. Title to give him a little bit more guidance as to what you're looking for.
Well, I think within, like, if you look at any of the, like, on the state website, when they say strategic profiles of the districts, they'll allocate a certain percentage of the budget to special education. And I think kind of typical is 20% of a budget or something in that neighborhood goes to special education. So it would be interesting to understand where Fairfield is on that spectrum and how that's moved over time. Clearly, how much of the new increase to our budget comes from that space, as well as the other special services that we offer, like to the English language learners. I think the ELL group also, how much of the budget do we actually allocate to that to benefit them? As well as the gifted population, how much of the budget do we actually allocate to them? Those are not necessarily mandated areas, unlike the special education space, which is why the special education space is, I think, so relevant from a risk management perspective, because we have less discretion over funding it. So it would be, I think, beneficial to us and I think the public, the community, to understand kind of how our funds are moving over time and to what purpose.
Do you have another question that you want to ask on another
Can I just
topic?
answer?
And then we can move ahead.
Yeah.
Same topic?
Just follow up, yeah.
Do you mind if
Just
Ms.
quick
Calabrese
calculation.
has a follow-up?
Just quick calculation. We're using about
Mrs.
12%.
McCormick, do you mind if he takes some time to do a follow-up on this topic?
Oh, I'd rather just get the formal number from them. I've done quick
12%.
calculations also, but let's just,
So,
I'd rather
please,
see the
continue.
breakdown. Across the whole spectrum, because on average, I've seen it as around 20% for other districts. If we're 12%, great, or
Right,
not
the
great,
budget
but-
number's here, and, doing the calculation, it comes out to 12%. So if you're basing it on 20%, what everybody else is doing, then we're spending less than we should be. So we should increase that.
I'm not saying whether we should increase or decrease. I want to understand what our trend has been over time, of what the state how they've impacted, because clearly the mandates have increased over time. And so what has the trend been? Were we at 5% before and now we're at 12%? How quickly has it been growing? And even if the trend has been 5% per year, then that's something that we have to budget for going forward. I think it's probably a relevant risk management exercise.
Your next question.
Okay. All right. I guess the last one I want to touch on is the instructional services. Let's see. I want to say that it's on page 37. Let's see if I have that right.
Yes.
Page 37?
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So, page 37, instructional services. Right, so when I looked at the instructional services headline, it looked like it was at about 2.6 million. But when I broke it down and looked at, how it was laid out, when I look at the instructional services, it actually is only $250,000. And other things are thrown into instructional services, like the pupil personnel services, which is a significant part of the instructional services, as well as the student activity expenses. But of the instructional services, really only $250,000 of our entire budget goes to instructional services, which is for assessments and curriculum development, and kind of, it seems like the core of what I would say I would consider some of the priorities of our district. So again, when looking at kind of the big picture, I would like to see that grow. I saw our textbook line grow tremendously this year, and I actually think that's wonderful. I think that is exactly where we should be spending our money, and the fact that we're going to spend on math textbooks and on social studies textbooks. I wish we were buying new science textbooks this year rather than waiting for another year. But, you know, I guess when I look back at the professional development on page, where is it? On page 150. You know, professional development to me, along with textbooks and curriculum development, have to be, to me, some of the most important spending items for students and student learning and student achievement that we can put our budget towards. And the numbers just look so light to me. And maybe they're heavier than they have been in prior years, and I love the fact that you broke them all out. But, you know, when I just look at the core specific area, professional development, it only adds up to $64,000 in total for the entire district.
That's not correct.
Okay, so maybe this isn't fully reflective of, you know,
Where are you getting that number from?
that's on page 150. I was looking at the professional development and just looking down the line, excluding the professional development that is leadership training. So I'm excluding the leadership training. I'm just looking at content and, you know, just the areas of study themselves. So when I just
Well, that
added up,
professional development of 105,000 is really important, and that is professional development, and it covers a lot of different areas. So, you know, I think that's important, and it might remember, because it doesn't quite say it this way, but remember I pointed out that line in the special education budget that's conferences / staff development? That's $150,000, and that's gone up substantially. So if you add all those buckets together, we get a pretty healthy number. And this is something that comes directly from curriculum leaders and from the directors, and it's not something we skimp on. So there is quite an emphasis on professional development. There's definitely, you know, increases going on in a lot of areas that are directly impacting, as you mentioned, the textbook line. The instructional services line is a bit of a misnomer because it, you know, you can see what's
right.
right.
When you look at it, really only $250,000 of the whole budget is allocated
Right,
towards
and that's so that's a little bit
services.
misleading. And I also will tell you that you know, you could see, you know, very large numbers in terms of curriculum development. I'll say that curriculum development is also a form of staff development, because as teachers are working on upgrading the curriculum, they're doing the latest research on the latest standards. They're looking at ways of instruction that can be improved upon. So it's not, you know, curriculum development often bleeds over into professional development. It's not, you know, necessarily just a standalone where there's writing curriculum guides. So it's a mixed bag there, but we feel we have in there is sufficient, and we've obviously increased a tremendous number of line items to improve in the textbook area, and that was really the priority.
Right.
It's almost $1 million
I
bump.
think that's fabulous. To be honest, like, I would be thrilled if we would reallocate more money towards this page. This page, to me, is the heart of what I think public schools are all about and what makes us truly excellent, and also the assessments. I think the assessments with the curriculum, with the professional development, and the text and materials, this is the heart. And if I add up all these numbers, I would love to see this grow. I would love to see this grow 5 times, 7 times, and find ways to cut from other areas of the budget and reallocate them to this page, because, again, this is the heart of what goes on in the classroom to me. And I'm thrilled that you've laid this out, because I think this is really important and maybe an area that I hope going forward will look to grow, both in the curriculum, the professional development, and text and materials. I mean, this is a huge first step that we've started investing in the texts. And I hope this carries over, because I understand we do wonderful professional development within district, but I also know that this is a very global world, and it would be wonderful to have professional development from external sources as well, maybe even international sources from global leaders in particular disciplines. So that's my final comment. I would, you know, I think this is a great start. I would love to see the budget on this page allocation grow, and I'd love to see transportation shrink.
Okay, thank you. I know that we have 2 other board members who have not yet asked questions. And if the two would mind if I went to the public and then came back to you, if we don't have too many members of the public here, and so it may not take as long as I might have allocated.
That's fine.
Or do you anticipate any additional questions? I know that you had a separate meeting with Dr. Title. Mr. Llewellyn, do you anticipate some questions?
I do.
Yes. So do you mind if I go to the public?
By all means.
So, out to the public. This is an opportunity for the public to address the board on any comments that they have on the 2016-17 budget. The same rules apply. Please come forward and state your name and address and tell us what you want to know in 3 minutes or less. Please state your name and address.
Suzanne Miska, 123 Reigate Road. It's really a pleasure to be sitting in front of you, not having to discuss the health insurance numbers. So kudos for that. I was anticipating a much higher budget, and it was a great pleasure to see it be more in perspective. I also appreciate the discussion on the process regarding how this all kind of worked with the unions. It was rather confusing, as this didn't seem to be the same process we've seen happen before, and I was just concerned that there might be the option that it could be perceived that contracts were being reopened, but obviously that's not what has taken place. I was surprised. I really thought there would be an executive meeting of the board before the discussion took place, but I'm sure that legal has provided you all with what you needed on that. On the math textbooks, I will disagree. I feel if we're going to buy math textbooks at the elementary level, I would like to see a curriculum review of the math program. Before we venture in buying a textbook, I'd like to see us relook at how that curriculum is working. The other piece that I think is very important, and it only seems to come to light so much, at least for me, during the budget season, is in the special education department. This area, to me, we have a lot of students involved. I would like to be able to appreciate, as a member of the public or someone who does not have a child in this program, what these programs are. I don't know the community partnership. I see the increase in, that has taken place over the last couple of years. It would be helpful for members of the public and other parents to appreciate some of these programs, and not just at budget time, but maybe an opportunity for some sort of discussion on the curriculum, requirements, needs of the special education program. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to come forward? Seeing nobody come forward, we'll back to the board for a wrap-up conversation. Mr. Llewellyn.
Thank you very much. I guess first off, to follow up on Mrs. Gerber's request for the legal breakdown, if we could please add to the right of the historical column for what the budget is, so we can kind of map where it's been and to where it's going, so that if there's actually an increase, we can kind of see where those increases are and which categories. That'd be great. Does that make sense?
So you want to see the historical breakout by the categories? Is that what you're saying?
Ms. Gerber asked for historical spending.
She asked for an update for the current year on legal.
Update
through December 31st.
6-month run.
To December 31, because you received the one for the prior fiscal year already. So that's what I heard. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have the older one.
But the old one's been out there, so she asked for an
I've
update.
got that too. That's fine.
Okay.
So if we could put that versus where we are in budget and what the new budget is next to that as well, please, so we can get a perspective on the trend, please. One of the questions I had that I didn't see in the book is the food service budget. And I know last time, we've subcontracted this out, but I know there was a discussion several months back about what would be the renewal. Would there be a guaranteed profit? Would there not be a guaranteed profit? And the basic status of that. So I guess, do we expect there to be any impact at all in this budget from food service?
No.
No. And could we please get a copy of that budget, or sorry, that latest contract that was ultimately executed?
We have a copy of the food service contract.
Perfect, thank you.
I don't think it's changed since you saw it last time.
That's been distributed. I don't think it's changed since last time.
We never got an executed one. We don't know what the final outcome of it was because it was being held up by the state because of changes in funding back last time it was discussed.
That would be for next year.
That's for the current year. We entered this current fiscal year.
For the
I
current year,
believe.
we're fine with the existing contract. It's a question with the state as to whether we have to go back out to bid for next year or not. The current year one hasn't changed from the one you saw before. The holdup was, would they let us stay with the current one? And the answer is yes, for this year.
So we stayed with the current one with the exact same terms, with a guaranteed profit of 100 and...
Doreen, you want to talk about this? It has no impact on the operating budget.
Well, it does if we have a guaranteed profit, though, possibly.
Because that money goes into the food service.
It doesn't flow
balance.
into our operating budget. It stays with the food service, the profit.
Understood. But let's understand the size of it.
We have a one-year amendment for this year, which is a guaranteed profit of 148, something like that.
Okay, so it went down slightly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. If we could just get a copy of that as a board, that'd be great.
Copy of the amendment.
Correct, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Page 33, wage reserves. Which units do we currently have, which bargaining units are currently, active in discussions or have not recently been?
Every non-certified bargaining unit's contract is either past due or will be expired by the end of June of 16.
Non-certified.
Non-certified. The teachers and administrators are set for 2 more years.
Right.
There is only one non-certified union that are currently in negotiations, and then the other 4 are scheduled to start springtime, give or take. So they're not currently, but they will be before this fiscal year is over.
And those 4 plus 1, what % of the total employees does that represent approximately?
It's all the non-certified.
About a third.
Third.
Okay.
So the entire potential increase in there has to go in the wage and benefit reserve.
Yep, no, absolutely, and I see the big increase. That's why I was
That's why
curious
there's
as
a
to what
big
size.
increase.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Thank you. Page 37, please. So on page 37 and 301, we have instructional service. The increase in the program assessment is due to a shift in the expense for the STAR mathematics and language arts assessments K to 8. Does this mean iReady is no longer with the district?
At the end of this year, we're switching over to STAR for math and language arts.
Okay, and have we done, STAR is in place now for language arts?
Yes, it is.
And have we done STAR mathematics?
No, we've not done STAR mathematics. We're switching over to it next year.
Okay, I guess my concern here is we will not have consecutive years of the same assessment, like 5 or 6 years for our elementary. We're also being asked in this book to allocate funds for a math textbook, yet we have no idea how we've done for the last 6 years, 5 years. I'm using generalizations, so please correct me with the number of years.
The STAR and the language arts assessments, first of all, the reason there's an increase in here is not so much that there's new money involved, but we're moving it. Used to be in the technology budget, and it's been moved out. So we're already paying for assessments. We're just changing the math one. So I guess I'll ask somebody from the curriculum department to talk about why we're making the move from iReady to STAR and how that will help us. I don't know who wants to do that. Looks like Meg.
Just briefly, last year we spent, many of us from the curriculum department as well as the school spent, I don't know how many hours looking at the options for assessments. And there were many available to us. We agreed that the 2 top choices were STAR and iReady. And we debated whether to use one or both, and we ended up deciding to go with iReady for math and STAR for reading. Right after that, STAR came out on the state's preferred assessment list, and STAR offered a rather nice package for reading and math, but we had already committed to iReady for math. So we had kind of in the back of our minds that we would kind of follow it this year to see whether it'd be worth our while to move over to STAR. And I think there's a couple reasons why we decided to do that. One significant reason is the amount of time it takes to give the assessment. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, because right now when the students take the iReady assessment, it takes about an hour or a little over an hour. And we really view instruction as one of the things that we really want to control and want to provide so we can maximize the amount of learning in our classroom. When we go to the STAR, it actually goes down to about 15 minutes. And we can get about the same type of data in that smaller amount of time, thus then protecting the instruction that goes on in the classroom. In terms of also the fixed price that was provided for STAR that we had to pay for this year was math and language arts combined, was part of the same price, and we felt that we can get that same amount through the STAR assessment than paying for two assessments. We can get the same thing for one.
And so, how many times a year are the kids actually assessed using iReady or STAR?
It would be 3 times a year.
It would be 3 times a year. So we're already paying for STAR.
Yes.
For the math.
Mm-hmm.
So we could implement that this year at no cost to the district, and then have a little bit of overlap and continuity. Because my fear is, here we sit going into our 5th or 6th year, and we have absolutely no comparable data year over year for our elementary math. So we've got kids who are moving into the middle school who have come through our math program, which was in-house developed without a textbook, and we don't know how they're performing.
Well, I don't think I agree with that statement, but let me just say one thing. One reason why we thought it was important to stay with iReady was that teachers have made their evaluation goals based on iReady. And we thought it was very important for the integrity of that process not to change for teachers how we were assessing students, because they wrote their goals the math teachers wrote their goals based on iReady. The reason I don't agree with that statement is both iReady and STAR are aligned to the Common Core. Our curriculum is aligned to the Common Core. So we feel very confident. We would not be switching to STAR if we thought there was going to be a disruption in monitoring results in math. We feel confident that we'll be able to still do that because both assessments have a common alignment to the Common Core standards.
But what we lose is our ability to understand whether or not we're increasing or decreasing versus the prior year. Are our kids growing or are they not growing? Because we have iReady data now that my understanding was adjusted kind of for Fairfield's curriculum versus using the national. Does STAR give us a national benchmark as well?
Do you know?
It will give us the same amount of information because a lot of times it is linked back to the SBA assessment, and that is really our common linkage. I mean, we look back very very carefully at looking at how well did the data that we got back from iReady align to the SBA, the Smarter Balance Assessment. So to me, to say that we have the kind of continuity, we still look back and look at the data and see how aligned in terms of how our students are achieving on that assessment, and that helps us determine over time how well for those couple years, in terms of, especially because we've changed over very recently, to be able to look at and judge our curriculum over time.
We're using these as formative assessments to help us determine and predict how well students are going to do on the SBAC and what support we need to give them as they prepare for it. So we did an alignment. Paul and Walter worked on an alignment of the iReady scores to SBAC, and they can do the very same thing for STAR. It's a correlation. They can do the same thing they did for iReady.
I understand. An answer that Dr. Tuttle gave earlier on another topic was that it's very important to have comparative data year over year. So I have a concern if we're moving from program to program. And now that I hear that this program's actually already paid for the existing year, and it's only 15 minutes, might not be bad to at least start to assemble that comparative data.
And that's something that we have discussed in terms of how to do that, but also the key thing is, as Meg discussed, that we still have students being able to, they have to take the 3 times a year for teacher goals. So now we don't want to start now adding more tests on top of it and losing more instructional time when we looked at now to add now on top of a spring I-ready test now to add a STAR assessment. So I mean, that again, we're taking more time out of instruction.
Because we also have our district improvement plan tied to it. But thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Before they leave, can I ask a add-on question?
Mr. Llewellyn, did you say yes?
I said sure.
Yeah. Mrs.
Just a quick question. You know, I took a lot of time looking at that iReady, and I finally got comfortable with what it was telling, and I actually really liked all the detail that it offered. And when I looked at the STAR report, I kind of felt like I wasn't sure what it was telling me by the number. And I'm not even sure that the staff was clear because it was such a short test. It was like a snapshot in time. The kid had a good 15 minutes or a bad 15 minutes versus the iReady, which was actually really kind of telling you what they knew or what they didn't, and if they did well or not, what areas within that caused the number to be good or bad, because they could have been done fabulous in 5 areas, but 1 or 2 areas, weak. And that is very good information because you can focus each student on where their needs are. So I'm concerned moving to STAR now, where there was more opaqueness on what the results were actually telling us. Will we be able to give students the same kind of feedback and give teachers the same kind of transparency as to what each kid really needs?
You have other questions,
I mean,
Mr. Llewellyn?
Please finish.
I mean, to me, I mean, the amount of time can work both ways. When you do an hour test, I mean, the amount of, I mean, the stamina a student has for that test after a certain amount of time decreases. So I mean, it works both ways. Where sometimes a short assessment, where the stamina of the student can actually maintain that and actually provide more reliable data. So that's why I wouldn't say one is right now, because one is longer, it is better, and one is shorter, it is less better. I would say, I would probably disagree with that. But in terms of, it is just another snapshot. It is another piece of data that the teacher uses based off of what they see in their classroom. I mean, it's not just a standalone, that's the only data point we're looking at. We use a lot of other data points in terms of all the various, in terms of the teacher assessments and other aspects to help judge how well a student is learning, not just on that one snapshot in time.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Hold on, may I ask one more question? I'm sorry, just one quick follow-up to Ms. Lou McCormick's. If I may just,
Mr.
since
Llewellyn,
we're brought in.
No, we're discussing the math curriculum in April.
It's Mr. Llewellyn's time, so
Right,
it's
but
up
since
to
this
him.
has been brought up, I can see this being a question, but to Ms. Lou McCormick's point, the point being both tests break out and give you the strand information that you need. Because I know that's where the SBAC has not been as helpful as, or as forthcoming with information as we wanted, but in that 15 minutes, so you're knowing if fractions, if the instruction is achieving its goal of students getting better at I give that just as one specific example, and you're getting the strand information with both tests.
Yes, we feel confident in the information we're getting from both tests, yes.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Thank you, sure. No problem. Page 45, textbooks references further back, page, I guess it's 96 or 97, where the textbooks are excuse me, it's page 96, where the textbooks are broken down further. We see, you know, proposed expenditures for, you know, the math, language arts, social sciences. By approving this budget, are we implicitly approving the textbook, or are each of the textbooks still going to come before the board for
No,
specific-
you know, this is a budget exercise, so.
I'm just making sure.
Yeah, so this allows us to, if we find a textbook that we want to recommend, there's actually money to pay for it should the board approve it.
Right.
So that's all. This doesn't have anything to do with it because we're not giving you a specific textbook. Well,
that
you know, right, we've given you an estimate of the cost of a textbook based on the sort of typical cost of books. But the process to select the book and recommend it to you is ongoing.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Just making sure. Page, actually, the prior page, the prior several pages, the section which is also referenced in summary on page 45, called Instructional Supplies and Materials. It's about $1,942,000
It's
proposed.
line number 401.
Line number 401, yeah, sorry. It's up $900,000 versus the prior, and the support for that is starting back in like the low 90s and going through 95 or 96. About 25% of that budget is into a category called general and office. What is that specifically? The others are all broken down by art, reading, English, world language, healthcare, but about 25% of that whole budget is into a general and office.
Where are you?
Pages are
What page are
pages
you on?
90. Basically, I think it starts on 80. Well, where does it start? Nope, sorry. It starts on.
You saying you've added the
Starts on
various
90.
pages together on that line item? And
So each school's line, is
26%.
that what you're saying?
Correct.
Right, so each school gets an allocation, and they put a certain amount of it into general supplies, which could be classroom supplies that are shared by everybody, or they could be office supplies that are used in the office. That's each individual principal decides how to take his or her allocation and put it in the different areas, but those are supplies that are used across all content areas, or they're office supplies used in the office. I don't
Okay,
know if
so-
there's a whole
so
lot to say about that.
It's instructional materials, but it's also.
Well, some
office
could be.
supplies.
Right, well, supplies can be instructional, or they can be just office. So if we have to buy envelopes because we're mailing something, that would come out of there. Is that about it? Doreen, do you have any more information you want to add to that?
You're correct. The general supplies can be instructional, pens, paper, pencils, generic instructional supplies or office supplies. The more specific instructional supplies are within the content areas at the secondary level.
Okay, so thank you for the clarifications. It's
Okay.
just office supplies, even though, got it, because under instructional. And then one other question is, how does the budget, and we may not have gotten there yet, but how does the budget address any potential costs associated with the findings of the consultant looking at the racial imbalance? So if we come up with whatever your scenario is, a new school, busing, whatever it is, how do we address that?
There's nothing in here on that. I've made an assumption that anything that the consultant comes up with, if the board were interested in it and wanted to go with it, probably would not be able to implement it for September of 16. That if we were going to make a large move, that we would change our plan, send it up to the state for approval. By the time that happened, you're probably into June sometime. So realistically, I don't see anything that the consultant comes up with, if the board is interested in it, happening in September, in the next fiscal year. I think you'd be looking at the
Following
budget
budget.
after that.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that, is it a fair assumption that as long as the state sees that we're making progress on this, they would not have a problem if it took us till September of 17 to implement the new idea?
Your guess is as good as mine. I have no idea what they might or might not do. You'll get that. The consultant will be here live and in living color in February.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Is that it? So we're here at 10. If there's no burning question that people want to ask, but if there is, I will give people an opportunity to do a speed dating single question. Ms. Pitko.
I just want to make sure that I'm clear on the process for budget season, because I know we were supposed to have questions in by Friday.
Yes.
I don't assume he got a lot of questions, because I didn't hear him say that he did. I just want to make sure, moving forward, what's the next step?
No, actually, we got a lot of questions.
Okay.
So there are questions that, within the 10 minutes, some board members didn't have a chance to ask, but they will be put into a Q&A document so that all the board members will know the answers to the question that some other board member asked, but wasn't asked here tonight. And board members are welcome to still submit questions so that they can be addressed by next Tuesday. And if you don't introduce any questions, you are welcome to ask them at the table. You just run the risk that the answer will be, we'll have to get back to you if it's too detailed of information that you're asking. So any other question that people want to ask? Go ahead. A third bite at the apple.
let's not deal with the bites at the apple. I did submit a number of questions, and I'm happy to wait for a written response, that you detailed on everything else. But I did have one I wanted to ask now, and if this involves something that I can wait till Tuesday for an answer, I just wanted to emphasize this was on page
number?
37.
37.
Under the instructional services 301. I will admit I was not happy seeing this. I would like to know the dollar amount affiliated with it, but that's not the reason I wasn't happy about it, and that was the new PSAT testing for grade 9 students. And I was hoping to hear, again, it doesn't have to be at this time, I'm happy with next Tuesday, but a fuller explanation of the rationale for that, knowing what we're giving up by doing that, and the monetary amount as well. But I'm far more interested in the philosophy behind it than the money.
And I'll just say that we're not completely there yet on doing this, but if we do want to do it, we have to have money in the budget to do it. So it's possible it doesn't happen, and it's still under discussion right now. But obviously, if we want to do it, it's available. If we want to do it, and we don't budget for it, it puts us in a hole.
Right.
So it's in the vicinity of $9,000, but we'll get that exact number out, because I think that will be in the written questions. Just for the ninth grade, something like that. $8 a student.
$6,400.
$6,400. So, but we can have more
Thank you.
detail on that. Okay.
I see nobody else is raising their hands. Let me, just as a reminder to you, that next Tuesday we will go through the balance of the book that is in detail. We have referenced the back pages as we asked questions, but we'll go through pages 53 through 122, which is the detail, and then 125 through 177, which is some backup materials. So if you want to focus your questions on those pages and submit them in advance, that would be helpful to the staff. The other thing that we normally do on Tuesday is to ask board members that if they are going to project any recommended amendments or changes to the budget, that they bring the topic up and the suggestion up on Tuesday so that the staff can adequately plan for, look at the cost implications of that to make sure that the board is acting on cost information to that idea. So we'll allow time after the end of the Q&A session for board members to identify any changes they may wish to make. And of course, we'll also have a out to the public for another session of comments from the public. And I think I already mentioned that the Q&A document we hope to have posted on Friday. That's the Q&A based on today's discussion and the answers, the questions provided in advance of this meeting. And I think that's it. Any questions or comments from the board on the next process? Mr. Patton.
Would the Q&A document be available on the website or for the public?
We have always
Okay.
posted them to the website, and so not exactly sure what time it'll get posted, but my guess is sometime on Friday. Is that a fair guess? Yeah. And if your question isn't on that document, that means that more study had to be given, so therefore they'll get it answered on Tuesday instead of in writing. Because we only really want to put questions and answers on there that we've had an adequate amount of time to really research and make sure that the answer is accurate. And that involves more than just one or two staff people frequently. Those questions are circulated to a variety of staff so that each person can kind of weigh in from their perspective. Anything else? Hearing none, do I have a motion for adjournment? Mrs. Gerber? Ms. Carnell? All in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you.